Before we get started here, I highly recommend you go back and watch my review of Fable Anniversary, as a lot of my thoughts in this video are direct comparisons to the first game. A link is in the description. Alright, Fable II. Wow. It's hard not to get excited about a sequel that so masterfully fixes almost all of the flaws that the previous game had. It would be wrong to begin this review talking about anything other than Fable 2's brilliant control scheme, which is the absolute highlight of the game. Just like Fable 1 before it, Fable 2 has three major trees that your attacks fall under: skill, will, and strength. Each one is mapped to a different face button, and the animations to swap between both are minimal, which means you'll be seamlessly switching between devastating melee attacks with a hammer and powerful magic blasts, then finishing off your opponent with a shot to the head. What takes this control scheme to the next level is how it integrates holding down buttons and directional inputs to squeeze so much value out of those single face buttons. It's a lot like Smash Brothers in that way. Hitting X while holding forward will swing your sword forward. Holding X while pushing forward will charge up that same attack. Hitting Y will fire a bullet, but holding Y will let you zoom in to aim at a specific body part. Perhaps most importantly is how this changes spells. One of my largest gripes with the control scheme of Fable 1 is how clunky it was swapping between spells mid-combat. Fable 2 fixes that entirely with the way holding down the button is done. You can map different spells to different durations of the button being held down, so holding it for half a second will yield a different spell than holding it for 2 seconds. The longer held spells will also deal more damage. On top of that, whether or not you're holding a direction while casting a spell will change its effects. If you hold down a direction while using your fire attack, a fireball will get sent at your enemy, but using the fire attack directionless will send lava spewing in all directions to attack your enemies. Interactions like this are true for every single spell in the game. These controls are nothing short of an achievement. It's incredible how much depth was able to be mapped to these three buttons without layering any difficult fighting game inputs on top of it or confusing the player in any way. These changes make the moment-to-moment gameplay so much better. The only slight against them is the out-of-combat movement. It's super floaty and your character looks like he's sliding around everywhere. Fable 2 takes place in Albion hundreds of years after the events of the first game. The older sister from the first game is present here as one of the primary characters, but no knowledge of the story of Fable 1 is required to get a grasp of what's going on here. You again start out as a young child, penniless and trying to scrounge up money to purchase a music box from a wandering salesman. You and your sister go around completing tasks and making decisions, either good or bad, to scrape up the money. Once that magical music box is yours, your wish to escape poverty is granted, and you get brought as an honored guest to Lord Lucien's castle. Lucien's intentions in bringing you here aren't exactly the purest, however, and the night ends with your sister getting killed and you being left to die. You get saved, and time skips forward many years, and you can begin to seek your vengeance. Time is skipped at a few other key points in the story, and Fable 2 makes good on your decisions by making actions visible in the world around you. Depending on your choices you made as a child, your hometown could be radically different. If you help the sheriff gather some lost arrest warrants, all the bad guys will be behind bars, and the town will be prosperous and lively. Had you aided the thieves instead, the town would become decrepit and crime-ridden. Your actions aren't the only thing that shape the world around you. Your inactions are just as important. Completely ignoring side quests to help the local church may leave it destroyed years later. Systems like this get across the game's anti-apathy theme really well. The Fable series is all about its systems. There are a lot of different moving parts that are going on in the world around you that affect one another. Chief among them is the morality system, which is back in full force. Your decisions causing you to go closer to good or evil as you make choices, and visual feedback on your character to drive the point home. Another awesome visual feature that interacts with your character is strength. Putting points into your strength statistic will actually make your character appear stronger, and eating too much food will cause him to gain weight. Scars will accumulate across your face with each death. There are so many different visual touches here, it's hard not to fall in love with how unique your character may end up, despite the fact that the only agency you had at the start was picking the gender. Marriage and real estate are back too. Real estate still felt really tacked on here, although at least this time the user interface to engage with this system feels much less hostile than it did in the first. Marriage feels far more important though. There are a few quests within the game that actually encourage you to engage with the marriage system. The courting process begins with you spamming emotes at your bride-to-be, giving her gifts, and then sealing the deal with a ring, just like real life.
Not too bad. Nice. Good, even.
Whether or not you marry has some good story ramifications later on. I just wish that they pushed the angle a little bit further and made your potential spouses more than just random NPCs. One of the other most important systems is renown. Whether or not you are known by the general populace affects many different aspects of your game. Certain quests may be locked off to you completely if you're a nobody. If you do become famous, townspeople may flock to you for your autograph and offer discounts on goods at their shop. You might be able to get one of those discounts if you strike fear into their hearts instead, just don't expect any autographs if you go that route. The conventional way to gain renown is by completing quests, but there are other options too. Paying a bard to sing your praises in town will raise awareness about your deeds, and as a bonus, his songs will be based on the quests that you've personally participated in. Maybe you want something a little bit more permanent to celebrate your glory instead. Head over to a stonemason and strike a pose to be memorialized forever in marble.
Fantastic. Please, you must hold your pose until I say so, not a moment earlier.
The core loop of the game is very different from Fable 1. The guild is no longer a hub that you're forced to backtrack to for each quest or to level up. It still exists, but you only need to go back there for a few story quests throughout the course of your playthrough. This gives the game a much more natural flow, in both taking on main and side content. Doing all this content is also made more enjoyable by the greatly increased size of the world. No longer are you stuck traversing down small hallways. The world is vast and easier to explore than ever with your new ability to vault over small obstacles. You will mainly spend your time picking up quests from random characters throughout town and doing lots and lots of combat. The combat itself is exceptional thanks to the incredible control scheme I opened this review with. Much like its predecessor, Fable II will spam you with hordes and hordes of enemies, but they're much more manageable and fun here due to the fact that magic is easier to make use of. And make use of magic you will. Even if you want to be a melee-loving brute, the game really pushes you into being a jack-of-all-trades who swaps between styles on the fly. As you kill enemies, you gain orbs of various colors which you could spend on leveling up. Some of these orbs are specific to certain trees, so you're strongly encouraged to be the all-powerful hero. And the progression really makes good on that promise. Each time you spend your points on something new, you will feel it. A lot of the times it'll be a new active ability that changes the way that you play. And even if it is just a passive stat bonus, these bonuses are given out in such sizable increments that you will definitely notice them the next time you start a fight. If you're a fan of visual customization, you will have a great time with Fable 2. In addition to all the indirect ways that your appearance is modified that I mentioned before, there's also a barber to give yourself different haircuts and different dyes to recolor your armor. The small amount of distinct armor and weapon models in the game might surprise you, but the ability to recolor them to almost anything still gives you enough flexibility to express yourself. Those dyes won't pay for themselves though, and Fable 2 has quite a few ways you can earn currency. The most lucrative is probably gaming the real estate system. Buying property and renting it out can represent some serious cash. But if you're into more blue-collar work, there are plenty of hands-on jobs around town. Chop wood out in the forest or head into the city and become a blacksmith. These jobs are controlled by minigames that sadly aren't very representative of the occupation that they mimic. They are monotonous, and the amount of money you get for your time spent isn't super great, but maybe that's kind of the point.
A good strike. What is it you want?
There's also a dog mechanic new to this game. You're given a pet dog at the start of your adventure who will show you spots to dig and sniff out nearby treasure. Being forced to have this canine companion robs some of the emotional attachment that could have come from electing whether or not you wanted one, and he really isn't integrated enough into the story to make his forced inclusion feel impactful. He really just feels like a gameplay mechanic that's shoved in there, and the one time he really comes up in the narrative feels incredibly forced. I'm sure you could probably guess what happens to him even if you've never played the game. The main story revolves around you rallying a crew to stop Lucian from destroying the world with his all-powerful Spire weapon. It's a far more well-paced story than Fable 1, but still doesn't reach any triumphant heights. It was perfectly acceptable and inoffensive, but your final standoff against Lucian is really anticlimactic. The standout section of the narrative was when you sneak into Lucian's base and take an undercover job as one of his guards. Visually, the Spire is robbed of light and bright colors, and being stuck here for so long, in and out of game, can really affect your mood. You're rigged with a collar that forces you to obey your superiors. Going along with their wishes will leave you unharmed, but disobeying will cause your character extreme pain and make him lose lots of experience points. The loss of experience points really drives the point home. It makes it not just a narrative decision of whether to be good or bad, but a gameplay one. And if you want to be the good guy, you have to accept the stakes. One scene in particular has you standing guard watching multiple starving inmates. Pulling the lever to give them food will sap you of lots of experience, but the alternative is sitting there for an agonizing 3 minutes as everyone begs you for your mercy. This whole sequence really leans into the morality system that the game is so heavily built around, and simultaneously pokes fun at gaming itself in a meta way. There is one major problem that I experienced in my time with Fable II, and sadly it was a technical one: frame rate. The frame rate slows to an absolute crawl when there's lots of enemies on screen, and sadly, that is a very frequent occurrence. It's especially frustrating because this game isn't on PC, which likely would have made the issue non-existent. Fable is the only series I know of where the first game is on PC, the third game is on PC, but the middle chapter isn't. Fable 2 is an Xbox 360 exclusive. You can play it through Xbox One backwards compatibility though. It's how I'm experiencing it. The technical problems and somewhat lackluster story were nowhere near enough to spoil the game for me. The combat is just so perfect. I had to force myself to stop playing after the credits rolled because all I wanted to do was jump back in and play more quests and fight more monsters. I think the largest indicator of how big of an improvement Fable 2 is over its predecessor is how much I actually enjoyed the arena quest in this game. In Fable 1, the arena quest line was a boring chore and a slog, taking place in a single boring room where dozens of enemies swarmed at you at a time and you had little ways to handle them all at once. Here, in the sequel, the arena questline has you traveling to different rooms within the same building, each with different layouts. And the ready accessibility of multiple spells at a time, and how easy they were to integrate between other attacks, just made it so damn fun. Pro tip, the time slowing spell also slows the countdown on the clock during this quest. Fable 2 is a textbook example of a sequel done right, and I can't wait to jump into the third game.